Seattle, 1992. Just you and the early light. Hey there. The city above is still shrouded in fog, but down here, the world sharpens to the chill of concrete and the persistent drip from a pipe overhead. Somewhere in this half-dark, on a mattress that sags beneath your weight, you find yourself awake again. Barely. This is not the glamorous story that gets told in glossy magazines. This is the one where the carpet squishes under your bare feet, cold and damp as any November sidewalk, and your breath forms little clouds you could almost scoop up with your hand. Each morning starts with the same question: will music save you or finish you? The air tastes of mildew and last night's cigarettes, sharp and stale, like a memory you can't scrub out. There's a guitar against the wall, battered and familiar, its strings still humming in your head from hours of playing loud enough to make your ears ring. It's not just noise. It's the only thing that feels real in a world that sometimes seems determined to forget you exist. The basement is your anchor and your cage, and every time you wake up here, you wonder how much of your life is left above ground at all. You pull the blanket tighter, feeling the ache in your back from sleeping on springs that gave up the fight years ago. The mattress is a thrift store relic, and the carpet beneath is a patchwork of stains. You count the cigarette burns near your pillow. 5. They remind you of the nights you and Jamie stayed up talking about how music could get you out of this basement, maybe even out of Seattle. Jamie always swore you'd play the Crocodile one day, open for someone big. You almost believed it. The sound of the leaky pipe is steady, like a slow metronome marking time until the next set. You wonder if today is the day something finally breaks. Maybe a string, maybe you. You sit up slowly, muscles stiff. The cold reaches through your flannel shirt, sleeves frayed and cuffs still damp from yesterday's rain. The only reason you even own this shirt is because Jamie found it in a lost and found at the bar. It smells like smoke and someone else's cologne, a scent that never quite fades. Every day starts like this, wrapped in layers of someone else's history, trying to write your own. The basement window is smeared with condensation, but you can make out the shadowy shapes of cars passing above. None of them are stopping for you. There's barely enough light to see the outline of your guitar, but you reach for it anyway. The wood is cold, the neck worn smooth from hours of practice. You run your fingers along the fretboard, feeling for the string you know is missing. Last night, during your third run-through of that new song, the high E snapped. You played the rest of the set anyway, letting the gaps become part of the sound. That's how it is here. Nothing is ever whole, but you keep playing through the breaks, hoping the music will fill in what's missing. Your head is still buzzing. Not from the cheap beer or the 2 hours of sleep, but from the music itself. The ringing in your ears is a constant reminder that you were alive last night, even if the world upstairs didn't notice. It's the kind of pain you learn to live with, like hunger or heartbreak. Sometimes you wonder if it'll ever go away, or if it just gets drowned out by the next song. You look at your hands, fingers raw from steel strings, nails bitten down. You remember the first time you played so hard your fingers bled. Jamie laughed and said, "It made you legit." You didn't feel tough then, just desperate. The only other sound is the slow drip of water from the pipe overhead. Each drop lands in a puddle near the door, spreading out in perfect circles. You wonder how long before the water reaches your mattress. You try not to think about mold. There's no money for a new place. You're barely scraping together enough for strings and bus fare to the next gig. You remember sleeping on floors and couches during that last mini tour, waking up with a crick in your neck and the taste of someone else's stale coffee on your tongue. Sometimes you think the music is the only thing keeping you from disappearing into the walls. You reach for the notebook beside your mattress. The pages are warped from the damp, but inside are lyrics scribbled in the dark, lines crossed out and rewritten until they blur into each other. Some nights you dream of a world where someone sings your words back to you. You picture the crowd at the crocodile or the off-ramp, faces turned toward you, arms raised, mouths open. Then the dream fades, replaced by the steady pulse of the basement. The reality is always colder, always heavier. You flip through the pages, searching for something you can use tonight. There's a new song taking shape, something about drowning, about trying to breathe through cement. You wonder if anyone will understand it, or if it'll get lost in the noise. A rat scurries along the wall, pausing to look at you before vanishing behind an amp. You laugh, a dry sound that echoes off cement. The band joked once that the rats were your first fans, the only ones who stuck around for the whole set. The truth is, you're playing for yourself most nights. The bar crowds are thin, faces hidden in shadow and smoke. You remember the last show, 3 people clapping, one of them asleep at the bar. Jamie said it was better than nothing. You're not sure you agree, but you keep playing anyway. Each night is another chance to matter, even if it's just for the length of a song. You glance at the wall clock, its hands stuck at 2 a.m. Time doesn't work right down here. Days blur together, marked only by the changing set lists and the shifting smells of the basement. You can hear muffled footsteps upstairs, someone leaving for work maybe, or just another ghost passing through. You think about your parents, 2 states away, who still believe you're in college. You haven't told them about the basement, about the gigs that barely pay enough for dinner. Some truths are too heavy to carry into the daylight. You close your eyes and let the sounds wash over you. The drip, the distant traffic, the memory of last night's chords. You wonder how many more mornings will start like this. Every day feels like a test. Can you survive the cold, the hunger, the invisibility? You tell yourself that music is enough, that if you keep playing, something will change. But there's a shadow in the corner of the room, a sense that time is running out. You don't know if it's the industry, the city, or just the weight of being forgotten, but it's always there, waiting. A new day is beginning, but the world above still feels out of reach. You listen to the steady drip, the silent guitar, and the echo of your own heartbeat. You're still here. That's something. You wonder what price you'll pay to stay. Seattle, 1992. You and your bandmate, Vince, barely awake, huddled in the basement of a rental house that smells of mildew and something older. You pull on a flannel shirt, sleeves frayed and damp at the cuffs. It's not about looking cool. It's about staying warm in the chill that never leaves these rooms. The faded plaid is your uniform, as much a badge of poverty as it is a shield. Outside, the city is grey and wet, but inside you wrap yourself in the only comfort you can afford. Flannel is less a fashion statement than a survival tactic. The fabric is rough against your skin, every thread carrying the memory of late-night gigs and missed meals. You can never seem to dry it out, not with the Pacific rain always seeping through the windows, not with the busted radiator that never quite manages to kick the cold. The floorboards groan under your boots as you move past stacks of battered cassettes and a milk crate full of demo tapes. Your lifeline, your lottery ticket, your secret script for a different future. Vince sits on a torn sofa with his knees tucked up, his own flannel shirt speckled with paint from a day job he never talks about. He picks idly at a guitar string, the note ringing sharp in the stale air before dissolving into the hum of the old refrigerator upstairs. The sound is raw, almost metallic, leaving a faint sting in your ears, a reminder that last night's set was too loud, too close, too much for the battered amps and your half-deaf eardrums. It's always cold in the basement, even when the city outside is sweating through a rare patch of sun. The concrete walls sweat too, and the only relief comes from the way the music fills the space. You run your fingers along the body of your pawnshop guitar, the wood chipped from 100 drops, the strings replaced only when you find a set someone else has thrown away. The drum kit in the corner is a Frankenstein of mismatched pieces, a snare with duct tape scars, a hi-hat that wobbles, and a bass drum salvaged from a bar that closed before you could even play there. Nothing matches, but it all works somehow. The sound it makes is yours, ugly, honest, loud enough to drown out the doubts that creep in during the long, hungry nights. You look at your hands. The calluses are your only jewelry. The rough patches proof that you belong here, at least for now. Each night you play until your fingers ache, until your ears ring, until the world narrows to the vibration of bass lines through the cracked plaster and the sting of sweat in your eyes. You don't play for a future. You play because there's no future in sight. Just the hope that tonight's song will hit harder than last night's, that someone in the crowd will remember your name in the morning. You climb the stairs, each step creaking under your weight, and step out into the drizzle-soaked daylight. The city has a way of swallowing you whole, every street slick with rain, every window fogged with secrets. You pass a magazine stand where glossy covers scream about the grunge look, faces staring out in plaid shirts and combat boots. You almost laugh. The world thinks it's a style, but you know it's just the cheapest thing on the rack at the Salvation Army. You wear it because it's all you can afford, because it survives the laundry, because it hides the stains that never quite come out. The fact that it became a symbol for a whole era feels like a private joke you never agreed to. Inside the bar, everything is louder, closer, and more urgent. You're early for sound check, but the owner lets you in anyway. The floor is sticky with dried beer, and the air is thick with the memory of last night's cigarettes. The stage is little more than a platform of warped wood, but it's yours for the next 60 minutes. Vince sets up the drum kit, muttering about the missing cymbal he'll have to borrow from the opening band. You plug in your guitar and strum a chord. The amp crackles, then roars, shaking the glasses behind the bar. Every note is a negotiation with the equipment. Will it work tonight, or will you have to play around another broken cable? You notice a flyer taped to the wall. Someone scribbled a review of your last show over the printed schedule, louder than the plumbing, but just as out of tune. You recognize the handwriting. It's from a zine that Vince's roommate runs out of his bedroom. Reviews written with more sarcasm than accuracy. You smirk. In this world, even your failures get recycled as jokes. You tape over the comment with a new flyer, advertising tonight's show. Maybe someone will see it. Maybe they won't. The city is full of bands, each one convinced they're on the brink of something big, while the rest of the world barely notices. You run through a set list, your voice hoarse from too many nights shouting over feedback and crowds that don't care. The monitor hisses, but you don't flinch. This is your territory, your moment. Sometimes, in the blur of sweat and noise, you imagine yourself on a stage that stretches into darkness, lights blinding, the roar of the crowd swelling beyond the walls of this bar. The fantasy flickers for a second, then fades as the bartender asks if you want another glass of water, the only thing on the house. Someone in the back laughs about your shoes, but you let it slide. You're not here for approval, you're here to be heard. The only thing that matters is the music vibrating through the soles of your boots, the sound that proves you exist, even if only for one night. Every note is a rebellion against the silence that waits outside these doors. The set ends. You pack up in silence, the sting of raw guitar strings still buzzing in your fingertips. Vince shrugs, and you both step back out into the wet night. The city hasn't changed, but you have. You feel it in the way your heart beats faster, in the echo of your own voice bouncing off the rain-slicked sidewalks. For a moment, you almost believe that this life could lead somewhere, but the cold seeps back in, and you remember that nothing here is promised. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails. You wonder if anyone will remember this night, or if it will dissolve into the endless grey that wraps around Seattle. You pull your flannel tighter, the fabric heavy with sweat and dreams. The legend is never as glamorous as the stories make it out to be. The real story is here, in the damp and the noise and the ache that never quite goes away. You keep walking, the taste of hope and rain mixed on your tongue, wondering how long you can keep going before you too fade into the background. Louder than the plumbing, but just as out of tune. Pike Street, midday. Just you and the hum of old neon overhead. Your shadow stretches across scuffed linoleum as you step inside the pawn shop, eyes blinking to adjust to the flicker of tired fluorescent lights. The air is thick with the smell of cold metal and something older, a mixture of stale cigarettes and the sour tang of mildew that seeps from the basement. It sticks to your skin, clings to your flannel, and reminds you exactly where you are. You pass a rack of guitars, each one rough around the edges, their finishes dulled from years of hands and hope. Most are chipped, some are outright broken, but you run your fingers across them anyway, feeling for something alive beneath the grime. Today you need an amp. Yours coughed out its last breath 2 nights ago, and nobody in the band has cash to spare. The amps here are not much better. They sit in a silent row, patched up with strips of duct tape, corners frayed and metal grills bent inwards. You crouch to test the weight of one, the handle sticky in your palm. It's heavier than you expect, and when you lift it, you hear something rattle inside. You wonder if that's a warning or just part of the charm. The man behind the counter barely looks up as you drag the amp over. He's got a newspaper spread out, half-heartedly reading the obituaries. You clear your throat. He grunts. The two of you begin the dance. He names a price. You flinch, and then you start slicing it down, dollar by dollar, until you're both pretending this is just business and not survival. You offer what you have, and it's not much, but it's all you can give. He finally shrugs and pushes the amp toward you, palms up. You slide over your crumpled bills. That's lunch for the next 3 days gone. The hunger doesn't bother you as much as the thought that the amp might not last the week. You leave the shop with the amp balanced awkwardly under one arm, your free hand jammed in your pocket. Outside, the sky is the color of dishwater, and the rain is more of a mist, soft enough to soak you without ever turning into real drops. You walk fast, not wanting to linger in the open. Every block you pass someone you half know, another kid in torn jeans, a drummer from a band that played before yours last Friday, a girl handing out flyers for a show nobody will remember. You nod, but nobody stops. Everyone has somewhere to be, even if it's just away from here. When you reach the apartment, you take the stairs 2 at a time, the amp thumping against your leg. The hallway smells like wet carpet, an old takeout. You let yourself in, careful not to wake. The roommate crashed on the couch. He's curled under a blanket, a pair of drumsticks poking out from beneath his pillow. The only drum kit you have is borrowed from a guy named Mike, who lives 2 floors up and doesn't mind as long as you bring it back before sunrise. Sometimes you wonder if Mike ever sleeps. You set the amp down in the corner, beside a tangle of cables and a snare drum missing its stand. The room is cluttered with gear, half of it scavenged, some of it on permanent loan, none of it matching. Your guitar is propped up next to the radiator, strings rusted and neck warped where the heat hits it. The pickguard is covered in stickers, most half peeled, a collage of band logos and inside jokes. You plug the guitar in, twist the amp's knob, and brace for disappointment. The sound is rough, a cough of static before the note breaks through. It's not clean, but it's loud. Sometimes that's enough. You remember the first time you played a real gig, if you can call it that. The venue was a bar on Capitol Hill, the kind of place that didn't check IDs if you looked old enough to know better. The stage was nothing more than a wooden platform in the corner, sticky with beer and ringed by a string of Christmas lights. The crowd was thin, mostly friends of the other bands, a few regulars nursing drinks and pretending not to notice you. The bartender wore a Nirvana shirt and a scowl. You weren't even old enough to drink, but nobody cared as long as the music was loud and the gear didn't catch fire. The drum kit was borrowed that night too, brought in piece by piece from somebody's car, cymbals dented and toms patched with gaffer tape. The microphone was dented, the cable frayed, and when you sang, your voice came out warped, twisted by the cheap speakers until it sounded like someone else entirely. You played hard anyway, letting the vibration of the bass rattle through your knees and the sting of the guitar strings numb your fingers. By the end of the set, you were sweating through your flannel, hands raw, but for a few minutes you felt real. You could almost believe the city saw you. The memory fades, replaced by the present, the amp humming in the quiet room. You wonder how much longer you can keep this up, trading sleep for rehearsal, food for gear, hope for noise. Every song feels like a small rebellion against the silence that waits outside these walls. But you know the silence always comes back. That's the part nobody talks about. The hours between shows. The days when nobody calls. The sense that you're fading at the edges. A knock at the door jolts you. It's Sam, your bassist. His hair still wet from the rain. He grins when he sees the amp. Nice find. Think it'll last? You shrug. Long enough, maybe? He laughs, but you both know that's a lie. The gear is always on the edge of breaking. So are you. Together, you pack up for tonight's rehearsal in the basement under 4th Avenue. The space is barely big enough for the band and the borrowed gear, but it's yours for a few hours. You haul the amp down the stairs, careful not to snag the cord. The walls down here sweat in the dark, the concrete slick and cold. The air is thick with the smell of mold and stale smoke, and every sound echoes, bouncing off the pipes and the low ceiling. The familiar sting of raw guitar strings presses into your fingertips as you tune up, the bass line from Sam's guitar vibrating through the cracked walls. You close your eyes and let yourself disappear into it for a second, letting the noise drown out everything else. The world outside doesn't matter here. Not the empty fridge, not the stack of bills, not the creeping worry that this is all you'll ever be. For now, the music is enough. Or at least, you tell yourself it is. When the amp sputters out mid-song, you and Sam lock eyes, neither of you surprised. You smack the side, and it coughs back to life, the sound even rougher than before. The moment breaks, but you keep playing. What else can you do? The city may have forgotten you, but you haven't forgotten how it feels to matter, if only for the length of a song. The day ends with you and Sam packing up in silence, sweat cooling on your skin. The amp is heavier now, or maybe you're just tired. As you haul it back upstairs, you wonder how many more nights you'll get away with this before someone finally gives out. You walk out into the Seattle night, rain picking up, streetlights smeared into halos. The city doesn't notice. But for a moment, you think maybe, just maybe, you left a mark that won't wash away so easily. Seattle, 1992. You and 3 others hunched in a damp basement that always smells faintly of mildew and yesterday's cigarettes. Your boots stick to a patch of warped linoleum near an amp that hums even when it's turned off. There's no real insulation here, only blankets tacked over window wells, and a single yellow bulb that makes everyone look jaundiced. Rain drums against the foundation, syncing with the restless shuffle of your drummer's foot as he fiddles with a cracked snare. You can see your breath if you stand too close to the wall. This is your rehearsal space, but calling it a studio would be a joke. The drum kit you use is a Frankenstein's monster of borrowed shells and pawnshop symbols, some of them still carrying the faded tape from a previous owner's failed repair. The kick pedal sticks, so you jam it down with a boot heel and hope it holds for another song. Everyone's gear is a patchwork. Your own amp is held together by a web of duct tape, silver stripes catching the single bulb whenever you shift to plug in your battered guitar. The amp's grill cloth is torn, exposing the speaker cone beneath. One more thing you promise yourself you'll fix, maybe after your next paycheck if there is one. The first riff of the night wobbles out, raw and a little too loud. The bass player's hands are red from the cold, but he still finds the groove, thudding out a line that rattles the cracked paint off the walls. Lyrics spill from your mouth, half shouted, half hummed, the words scrawled in a stained, spiral-bound school notebook balanced on a milk crate. The pages curl at the corners, warped by coffee and something unidentifiable that leaked from a forgotten sandwich wrapper. You lose yourself in the ritual. The sting of raw guitar strings bites at your fingers, leaving faint lines that will ache tomorrow. The music is never clean. There's always a buzz of interference, a cable that needs wiggling, or a cymbal that collapses mid-song, sending a shiver of laughter and frustration through the group. But you keep playing, because stopping would mean facing the silence, the kind that swallows whole days between shows and makes you wonder if anyone outside these four cracked walls will ever hear your songs. Sometimes the drummer's snare breaks open mid-fill. He fixes it with a pair of pliers and a rubber band, and you all pretend this is normal. Instruments come and go. You trade a pedal for string sets, or a half-working amp for a carton of cigarettes, always hustling, always one step from having nothing left to play on. There's no glamour here. Sweat pools at your collarbone, mixing with the grit of wet flannel that never quite dries between rehearsals. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and the sweet sour tang of spilled beer. Every surface is sticky to the touch. The sound of your band is a living thing, loud enough to drown out the clatter of pipes overhead and the distant siren wail somewhere above street level. You think about the last show, a dive bar across town, the kind with a bathroom door that won't close, and a stage barely big enough for your mismatched gear. Halfway through the set, your guitar cable fizzled out, so you played unplugged for a song and let the drummer carry the energy. The crowd barely noticed. They were too busy yelling their own conversations over the music, lost in a haze of cheap beer and neon light. But there was a moment, brief and blinding, when your voice broke through the noise and someone at the bar looked up, really listened. That was enough. For a second, you believed that the music might reach further than the walls of this basement, that someday your words would echo in a room full of strangers chanting them back to you. Hope flickers, then gutters. You remember the rent due in 5 days, the job you might lose if you show up late again, the way your parents stopped asking about the band. You remember how the industry guys, the ones who promise everything but never return your calls, always say the sound is too raw, too messy, too real. You wonder if that's just another way of saying invisible. The set ends, but the ritual continues. You all collapse onto battered couches, passing around a bottle of cheap whiskey that burns on the way down. The pages of your notebook are smeared with new ideas, fragments of songs that might never make it past these walls. The bass player taps out a rhythm on his thigh, already thinking about the next riff. The drummer lights another cigarette, smoke curling around his head like a halo. Outside, the rain picks up, and the city above feels impossibly far away. Someone jokes that at least the mildew keeps the cops from hanging around too long. Laughter bounces off the concrete, sharp and desperate. You all know the punchline, even if no one says it. This could end at any moment. A landlord's knock, another broken amp, a night when nobody shows up. You keep playing anyway. Your hands are raw, fingertips split from hours of rehearsal. The ache in your shoulders is a badge of survival. Each song is a small rebellion against the slow erasure that waits outside, in the blank stares of day jobs and the empty promises of the city's music scene. The music is all you have, and for tonight, That's enough. You glance at your gear, counting the layers of tape, the borrowed symbols, the notebook pages clinging together with sweat and hope. Everything is worn but stubbornly alive. You wonder how much longer you can keep this up, how many more nights the basement will hold you before the world. Outside finally seeps in and swallows it all. You close your eyes and listen to the last echo of the bass line bouncing through the cracked walls. For a heartbeat, the noise and the hardship fall away, and you are left with the ghost of a song no one else will ever hear. Somewhere above, the city keeps moving, indifferent and endless. Down here you play on, carving meaning from the chaos, one battered note at a time. Seattle, 1992, just after midnight, you and your bassist, Mark, hunched over your battered amps in the corner of the Crocodile's basement bar. The air tastes of spilled beer and 100 cigarettes. Fluorescent bulbs flicker overhead, buzzing like angry hornets, spotlighting the patchwork duct tape holding your set list to the monitor wedge. Your hands are numb as you drag your amp, borrowed again from Mark's older brother, onto the low stage. The floor feels tacky, every step sucking at your boots, and your flannel shirt clings damp against your skin. You glance up. The crowd is a handful of regulars slouched at the bar, plus 2 strangers nursing Rainiers, silent and unreadable. Maybe one is just lost, waiting for a bus that never comes. You trade a look with Mark. His eyes are rimmed in red, hair stringy from the drizzle outside. He shrugs. This is what you both signed up for. You strum a single chord, fingers stinging from a split nail, the sound reverberating through the cracked walls. The first note is swallowed by the room, but you keep going. Each chord is a declaration, a small rebellion against the emptiness. You know every set in this city starts like this, a whisper against the static, hoping someone hears you at all. Your drummer, Cass, counts you in, sticks clacking like bones. The 3 of you launch into the opener, a song you wrote last week in Mark's basement. It is not perfect. The tempo slips, the guitar buzzes, and you miss the high note in the chorus. But no one winces. Out here, perfection is a rumor. What matters is that you are honest, raw, and persistent. The regulars nod along, eyes half closed behind the haze of smoke, as if they recognize some piece of their own story in your noise. You glance at the drink tickets taped to your amp, your only payment tonight. The bartender, a woman with a faded Soundgarden tee, will hand you 2 PBRs at the end of your set. If you split them, that means 1 apiece, and maybe you can trade the second for a limp cheeseburger at closing. You force a smile. This is not a glamorous life, but for now, it is yours. Your amp crackles mid-song. Mark shoots you a desperate look, mouthing that the input jack is loose again. You kneel, jiggling the cable, praying it holds. The sound wobbles but stays. You have played with borrowed gear since your first house party gig, never quite sure if everything will work. Sometimes you wonder if the equipment is as tired as you are. A woman in a shredded parka shouts, "Play something real." You launch into a cover, something old, but pour your own ache into the chords. The room quiets for a moment. You feel the bass line in your bones, the vibration running up through the soles of your shoes. The air is thick with mildew and sweat. For a heartbeat, you are not invisible. You are seen, if only by a handful of strangers who will forget your name by dawn. Still, you play on. At the end of the set, the applause is sparse but genuine. The bartender grins, slides the drink tickets across the bar. Mart pockets them, hands you one. Cass offers a high five, her palms as rough as yours. You linger on stage, unplugging cables, wishing the moment would stretch longer. The neon sign above the bar flickers. Tomorrow, no one will remember this set, but tonight you played. You existed. Outside, the rain is relentless. You and Mark huddle under the awning, gear stacked between you. You glance at your hands, calloused, blackened with string grime. You wonder if you will ever play to more than a dozen faces, if your songs will ever matter beyond these sticky floors. But you also know this is where every band starts. Grunge is not about stadiums or radio singles or magazine covers. It is about showing up night after night, no matter how small the crowd, how unreliable the gear, how uncertain the future. You remember your parents' faces when you left for the gig. Your mom, arms folded, said, "Another show? Don't stay out too late." Your dad just nodded, already resigned to the noise in the basement, the late-night rehearsals echoing up through the vents. They probably think this is just a phase, like skateboards and comic books. You wish you could tell them how much it matters, how every chord is a lifeline. Mart breaks the silence. Think we'll ever get paid in cash? You laugh, not because it is funny, but because it is better than giving up. The rain pounds harder, drumming a rhythm on the sidewalk. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails, swallowed by the night. You walk home, guitar case heavy in your hand, head buzzing with the lingering feedback. The city is alive with secrets, steam rising from sewer grates, streetlights bending in the drizzle. You pass a mural, colors bleeding in the wet, and catch your reflection in a storefront window. For a moment you imagine the headline, "Local band makes good." Then the image fades. The truth is, most nights, you are just another silhouette walking home. Tonight, the only thing that remains is the sting of your fingers and the memory of the stage, your escape and your cage. The music will echo in your head until sleep finally takes you. This is what it means to fight for a place in the world, even when the world barely notices. The emptiness of the bar lingers as you close your eyes. But tomorrow you will pick up your guitar again, hoping that the next chord carries a little further. By day, you are a face in the crowd at school, invisible in the halls, headphones blaring stolen moments of rebellion. Seattle, 1992, after school, you and your bandmates in the basement. You stand in the corner, half hidden by a stack of laundry, guitar slung low, amp humming quietly. The walls drip with condensation. The smell of wet flannel, stale cigarettes, and mildew wraps around you like a second skin. Every footstep on the concrete floor is a cold reminder that, here, you're more of a rumor than a person. At school, you drift through the halls, headphones glued to your ears, the soundtrack of your life drowned out by the static of disinterest. Teachers barely remember your name. To them, you're just another kid lost in the crowd, another hoodie with nothing to say. You catch your own reflection in the windows sometimes and wonder if you're really there at all, or just passing through someone else's dream. Home is no different. The kitchen table is a silent battleground where you sit across from your parents, both of them staring at the ceiling or their coffee cups. They say nothing about the band. They never ask about lyrics or riffs. Once in a while, your mother sighs when your music drifts up through the floorboards, and your father mutters that this phase will pass. You don't answer. You know what it's like to be tolerated, but never understood. Down in the basement, though, everything sharpens. The cold turns your fingers stiff, but the pain makes you play harder. The first chord slices through the damp air, raw and unpolished. The amp crackles, your voice fuzzes into the battered microphone, and suddenly you can hear yourself, even if no one else really can. The others, Mark on bass, Jen on drums, lock in with you, eyes closed, faces lit by the faint glow of a single bare bulb. Here, you aren't invisible. You're loud. You're alive. Most nights, you practice until your fingertips split. Sometimes the power cuts out, and you're left in darkness, the echo of the last note hanging in the air. You wait in silence, counting heartbeats, before someone cracks a joke about haunted Seattle basements, and you all laugh, the sound bouncing off cinder-block walls. Then you start again, because you have nothing else to do and nowhere else to go. On weekends, you find yourselves on stage in a bar that smells like spilled beer and lost bets. The crowd is thin, faces hidden behind clouds of smoke. You play anyway. The speakers distort your voice, turning every lyric into a growl. But you push through, hoping that someone out there is listening. The bass pulses through the floor, rattling empty glasses. For a moment, you almost believe you matter. After the set, you pack up your gear in near silence. Sometimes a stranger nods in your direction, a quick, wordless acknowledgement that you were real for a second. The rest of the world moves on. You step out into the night, the cold air biting against your sweat-soaked shirt. Your boots crunch on damp pavement as you walk home, demo tapes stuffed in your backpack. The tapes are always a little warped, the hiss of cheap plastic fighting against every chorus. You hand them out anyway, hoping the right person will hear past the static and find something worth saving. You keep coming back to the same question. If no one sees you, do you really exist? Music is the only answer you trust. It's the only place you don't have to apologize for being loud, for being angry, for wanting more. Every note is a small act of rebellion. Every lyric, a way to carve your name into the damp concrete before it all washes away. Tonight, the groove hits. For just a minute, the band locks into something bigger than the four of you. The drums and bass fuse into a heartbeat. The guitar wails. Your voice cracks open. It feels like flying. Then, just as quickly, it's over. Someone misses a cue, the spell breaks, and you're back in the basement, surrounded by peeling paint and laundry piles. You laugh it off. That's how it always goes. The best moments are the ones no one else will ever see. Your parents are upstairs, TV murmuring in the background, hoping you'll get this out of your system. At school tomorrow, you'll disappear again, lost in a crowd that never looks up. But down here, with the sting of guitar strings on your fingers and bass lines shaking the walls, you're more than a shadow. That's the trade. For a few fleeting minutes you exist without apology. Then the lights go out, the world tilts back to grey, and you're invisible again. But you keep playing because you're not ready to fade. Not yet. The air is thick with the smell of old smoke and wet earth as you pack up for the night. Upstairs, the world sleeps on, unaware of the rebellion brewing below. You wonder if anyone will remember your name when the music stops, or if you'll just become another ghost in the city's long, rainy nights. You and your friends spend hours dubbing demo tapes on a battered stereo, the hiss of cheap cassettes filling the room. Seattle, 1992. You and two friends crammed into a mildewed basement, elbows bumping over a battered stereo. The air is thick with stale smoke, and that unmistakable chill of wet concrete, the kind that settles in your bones and never quite leaves. You can feel the grit of your flannel shirt against your neck. One friend, Danny, feeds a blank cassette into the deck with the steady hands of someone who's done this 100 times. The other, Liz, scribbles your band's name, scrawled lightning bolt for an S, across the torn label with a marker that's nearly dry. The tape hisses as the music dubs over, your songs bleeding into the magnetic ribbon. Each copy is a tiny act of hope, even as you know these cassettes will warp and hiss after too many plays, their sound fading into static shadows of what you remember playing. The basement is cluttered with the relics of your ambition. A guitar with duct tape binding the output jack, an amp that buzzes if you breathe too close, and a milk crate overflowing with demo tapes. Every surface is dusted with a mix of mildew and sawdust. You listen for the subtle click that means the tape has finished dubbing, then flip it over and start again. The process is slow, repetitive, and strangely sacred. You catch yourself thinking how each tape is like a bottled message cast into a stormy sea. Maybe it'll be found. Maybe it'll just sink to the bottom and decay. You and your friends don't talk much while you work. The only voices are the ones on tape, your own, raw and distorted, fighting through the cheap microphones you borrowed from the community center. The vocals crackle, the guitar solos sometimes vanish into a blizzard of fuzz. But in the moment, it feels honest. Sometimes you think the distortion is the only thing that makes the music feel real. When you finally surface from the basement, blinking against the weak light filtering through dirty windows, you stuff your pockets with tapes and head out into the drizzle. The city's pulse is everywhere. Rain tapping tin awnings, neon smudged by fog, the distant thump of bass lines leaking from apartment windows. You pass through Capitol Hill, your boots splashing through puddles, until you reach the record store. The bell above the door gives a tired jangle. The walls are plastered with hand-drawn flyers, their corners curling from the damp. You tack your own up, nudging aside a faded one from a band that played here last month and vanished. Your phone number is scrawled in the margin, hopeful and desperate at the same time. You watch as Liz smooths out the flyer, her fingers leaving smudges on the glass. There's a strange intimacy in the act, like you're leaving a piece of yourself behind, hoping it'll catch someone's eye. You scan the faces of the other kids in the store. Most are hunched over crates, headphones on, lost in their own sonic worlds. But every so often, someone pauses, glances up at your flyer, then moves on. That split second of attention is all you get, and it has to be enough. Later, you lug your gear through alleys slick with rain to a bar where the stage is barely a foot off the ground. The air is a soup of spilled beer and old cigarettes. the walls pulsing with music from the last band's set. You set up your amp, held together with more tape than actual hardware, and the sound check is a mess. The microphone distorts your voice into a grainy snarl, turning lyrics to static. It's not pretty, but it's loud, and that's what matters. The crowd packs in shoulder to shoulder, sweat and rain mixing until you can't tell what's dripping down your back. You can feel the floorboards flex each time the bass hits. There's a rush, a surge, like you might lift off the ground or dissolve entirely. For a few songs, you're visible, undeniable. You see a kid at the front, mouthing along to every word, and for a moment, you believe your music is bigger than this room. But the high never lasts. After the set, you huddle near the fire exit, shivering as the night air cuts through your sweat-soaked flannel. The only payment is a handful of crumpled bills and 2 drink tickets. You split the cash for bus fare, arguing over who gets the last tape to hand out. It's hard not to notice how quickly the crowd empties, how the bar returns to its regulars, and how the posters with your name fade under new layers each week. You wonder, just for a second, if any of it matters. Will anyone remember your songs when the cassettes hiss into oblivion? Did the music make you real? Or are you just another ghost in the city's endless rain? The only answer is the sting in your fingertips and the roughness in your voice. Existence gets measured in demo tapes and flyers, in sweat and feedback, in the knowledge that you tried to shout your name above the static. The next morning, you wake to the sound of rain and the faint hope that maybe, somewhere, someone is rewinding your tape and listening again. What? The basement still smells of mildew and burnt coffee. The stereo hums, waiting for the next round. There's a rumor floating through the city. An indie label scout is in town, looking for something raw. But you've heard this before. Most offers dissolve by morning, leaving only more warped tapes behind. Still, you press record. Seattle, 1992. You and your bandmates huddle in the cold basement, the city's grey morning pressing in through the cracked window. The only warmth comes from a half-broken space heater and the friction of your nerves. You clutch a 7-inch test pressing in your hand, the white label almost glowing against the grime beneath your fingernails. The edges of the record dig into your palm, a small ache, but you hold tight. This is the closest thing to proof that you exist as a musician. There's a rumor that an indie label scout is hanging around town, maybe watching from the back of the Crocodile Cafe, maybe just another ghost. You've heard this before. The offers that trickle down are always the same. A couple hundred records, a handshake, and a promise that feels slippery as rain. You try not to care, but you do. You can almost see your band's name in blocky print, stacked beside the legends. Only smaller, only in the corners of record bins. The economics of it all are brutal. You stare at the envelope in your pocket. Last week's bar gig money. Not enough for rent and groceries and new strings, so you skip breakfast again. The ache in your stomach is a reminder that you're gambling everything on a few songs pressed into plastic. Every dollar that goes into the band is a dollar you won't get back. You joke about selling plasma for gas money, but it's not really a joke. The city is always wet. Your flannel shirt never dries, the fabric rough against your skin. Mold, creeps across the ceiling. You breathe in mildew and the stale smoke that never truly leaves this room. The air is thick with the smell of old beer and sweat, layered with the tang of metal from guitar strings that bite your fingers raw. You write lyrics on the back of a pizza box, your pen scratching out words while the bass vibrates through the floorboards. Sometimes you bring those scribbled lines on stage, the ink smudged and barely legible under the dim lights. The words shake in your hands, half memory, half hope, and your voice cracks as you sing them out loud. Most nights, the stage is nothing more than a battered wooden platform in the corner of a bar. The monitors buzz, and the crowd is a blur of flannel and ripped jeans, faces lost in the smoke. Sometimes, when you close your eyes mid-song, you imagine yourself somewhere bigger. You picture the roar of a festival crowd, thousands of hands thrown up in the dark, all of them singing your chorus. But when you open your eyes, you're still here, bassline thumping against your chest, the world reduced to a few flickering bulbs and the sticky floor. You remember school. You remember how invisible you felt there, how every day was a silent negotiation between being misunderstood and being just another ghost. Home wasn't much better, music too loud, dreams too strange, no one really listening. You built a wall of sound around yourself. Now, the band is your only family, and the songs are the only language that makes sense. Tonight, the rumor of the label scout hangs over everything. You can feel it in the hush between songs, the way your drummer glances at the door. The set list is scrawled on the inside of your wrist. You play harder than usual, pushing your voice until it splinters. Afterwards, a guy in a leather jacket approaches. He shakes your hand, says he likes your sound, and that he can get you a deal. Just a small vinyl run, nothing major. You try to sound grateful. He leaves before you can ask his name. You carry your amp out to the alley, the rain stinging your face. The street lights flicker, reflecting off puddles and cigarette butts. You catch your reflection in a car window, hair plastered to your forehead, eyeliner smeared, eyes hollow. You wonder if this is what success looks like. A rumor, a handshake, and a vanishing act. The test pressing in your bag feels heavier than ever. You walk home with your bandmates, silence stretching between you. The city is asleep, but you can't stop thinking about what comes next. Rent is due in 3 days. The landlord won't wait. The dream is always just out of reach, flickering like the neon sign outside your apartment. You slip the record onto your turntable and let the needle drop. The first notes crackle through the speakers, filling the room with the only thing that feels real. The consequence is simple. You're left in the same damp basement, the same grind, the same gamble. The industry's attention is colder than the rain, and you are both seen and unseen at once. You cling to the hope that something is about to change, but the city swallows that hope as easily as it swallows the sound of your last chord. The night settles in, heavy and absolute. You fall asleep listening for echoes of your own music, unsure if anyone else will ever hear them. In the grey morning, the rumor of escape lingers, but the reality is always the same. Existence measured out in bruised fingers, empty pockets, and the fleeting glow of a song that might fade before anyone remembers your name. Portland, Oregon, 1993. You, a drummer named Jamie, and a borrowed van with more rust than paint. The sun is still hiding behind a low ceiling of clouds when you wake. Your cheek is pressed against the carpet of a stranger's living room. There's a stale, sour scent hanging in the air, beer, cigarettes, and the faint perfume of old pizza. It's not your place. You don't remember the host's name. Your throat is raw, like you've been breathing in sand all night. Jamie is snoring beside a coffee table, his foot tangled in a frayed blanket. The van keys are under your shoe, as if you hoped they'd stay safe that way. This is the rhythm of tour life. You crash wherever there's an offer, sometimes on a floor, sometimes on a torn-up couch that pokes your ribs all night. Sometimes you wake up in a room covered with old band posters and water stains on the ceiling, the walls thin enough to let in muffled shouts from the kitchen. The only constant is the ache in your spine, and the sense that you're always just passing through someone else's life. You pull on your flannel shirt, still damp from the previous night. The fabric sticks to your skin, cold and gritty. Your hands sting as you flex your fingers, calluses split and sore from the show. You remember the club, a low ceiling, broken monitors, and a sound system that seemed allergic to clarity. Your voice had disappeared into a cloud of static, merging with the distortion, swallowed by the cheap speakers. You sang anyway, pushing your words out over the heads of the crowd, hoping someone would hear them. There's a notebook in your backpack, the kind you used to carry to school. Its pages are covered in messy lyrics and half-formed ideas, some written in the back seat of the van while Jamie drove through rain so thick it blurred the road. You scribble new lines as the city wakes up outside, sirens echoing somewhere in the distance. Every song feels like a secret broadcast, a message you hope will escape the smallness of these rooms. The van is parked a block away, wedged between a dumpster and a pickup with a cracked windshield. You load your battered gear into the back, amps with busted corners, a drum kit that's held together with duct tape, guitar cases scuffed from too many hurried exits. The air tastes like wet concrete and exhaust. Even the city seems tired. You drive to the next venue, a bar on the edge of downtown that smells like spilled beer before noon. The owner barely looks up as you lug your stuff inside. There's a stage, but it's barely raised from the sticky floor. The lights flicker when you plug in. Jamie grumbles about the monitors, but you all know the drill. You set up, tune, and wait. At soundcheck, your voice is half gone, but you push through. The guitar strings bite into your fingertips, leaving thin lines that throb with every chord. The bass rumbles through the cracked walls, making the glasses behind the bar shiver. You glance at the handful of people in the room, other musicians, a bartender wiping down the counter, maybe one or two regulars who don't even look up. For a moment, you remember why you started this. The hope that your music will break through, that someone will hear the truth in your words, and it will mean something. It's a thin hope, but it's enough to keep you moving. Every night, you tell yourself that the right person might be in the crowd, that your voice will finally cut through the noise. You pass out flyers at a nearby record store, pinning them to a corkboard already crowded with other bands' dreams. The paper is soft from the damp air, ink slightly smeared. You scan the names, some familiar, some gone, some already legends in their own tiny circles. Jamie jokes that you should autograph a flyer in case the band ever matters. You laugh, but part of you wonders if he's right. The days blend together on the road. You lose track of the cities, the faces, even the songs sometimes. Meals come from gas stations, chips, soda, maybe a bruised apple if you're lucky. You measure time in miles and set lists. Sleep is something you chase but never quite catch. Every morning your body feels heavier, your eyes slower to open. Once, in Olympia, you play for 7 people. 4 of them are in the opening band. The bartender shrugs when you ask about pay. You split $20 and a pitcher of beer. Jamie says it's still better than working retail. You nod, but you're not sure he believes it. On the drive north, rain taps the windshield in an endless rhythm. You watch the headlights smear across the glass, the world outside turning to watercolor. The van heater coughs and dies. You shiver, wrapping your arms around yourself, trying to remember what warmth felt like. There's a comfort in the misery. Everyone in the van shares it. You're all in this together, even if you barely speak. Sometimes you catch yourself dreaming about home. Not the place, but the feeling. A bed that smells like your laundry. A shower that stays hot. The certainty that tomorrow won't be exactly like today. But you shake it off. The road is your home now, as much as any city or stage ever was. One night in Tacoma, the show ends with feedback screaming through the speakers. The crowd is gone before you finish packing. You sit on the curb, staring at the neon sign flickering above the bar. The air is thick with mildew and exhaust. You light a cigarette, the tip glowing in the dark. Jamie sits beside you, silent. Neither of you says anything. There's nothing left to say. You wonder if anyone will remember this band. If the songs you wrote in that battered notebook will mean anything when the last chord fades. Or if you'll be just another name on a flyer, curling at the edges, forgotten on a corkboard in some record store basement. The night closes in around you, and you realize the hope that keeps you moving is the same thing that makes it hurt. The road doesn't care about dreams. It just keeps going. You stand up, pocket the pack of cigarettes, and head back to the van. Jamie follows without a word. You drive on, chasing the next stage, the next crowd, the next chance to be heard. The van rattles over potholes, the city lights receding in the rear view. The world outside is cold, wet, and indifferent. Inside, the only warmth comes from the music still echoing in your head. For now, that's enough. You don't know if you'll ever make it out of these basements and bar rooms, but the promise of another city, another night on stage, keeps you moving. Tomorrow will look just like today, but it might sound different. Sometimes, that's all you have. Seattle, late evening, you and 3 other bandmates huddled in a basement that smells like wet earth and cigarettes. You can hear the faint hum of a distant train, but it's the bass line from an old stereo that really rattles the cracked walls. Your fingers are raw, the flannel on your shoulders still damp from the drizzle outside, and the only thing keeping the cold from biting deeper is the heat from all these bodies pressed tight in the tiny room. There's a battered drum kit in the corner, paint chipped and heads patched with duct tape. It's been passed down from band to band, a sort of unofficial inheritance in the local scene. You and your friends swap stories over it, laughing about the time a snare snapped mid-song and someone tried to keep the beat with a trash can lid. The stories are always a little too close to the truth. Everyone's broke, everyone's tired, but nobody wants to admit how close they are to giving up. Tonight, you're trading more than just memories. The guy from the band next door, Zane, always with the battered cowboy boots, offers up his amp. He found it at a pawn shop, wires half exposed, but it still growls when you push it. You give him your spare set of strings, even though you know you'll have to borrow someone else's next week. There's no pride in this, but there is survival. Each piece of gear carries its own scar, a history etched into the wood and metal. It's not about ownership. It's about getting through the next set together. Outside, the rain is relentless. The city feels like it's always shrouded in mist, and when you walk to the next gig, your boots slap through puddles, the water soaking in before you even reach the curb. The venue tonight is a dive bar with no real sign, just a flickering neon light and a door that sticks if you don't shoulder it open. Inside, the air is thick with stale smoke and mildew. You can barely see the opposite wall, but you can feel the crowd, packed in shoulder to shoulder, breathing in unison, waiting for the first feedback squeal to cut through the haze. You set up quick, using whatever you can scrounge. The drum kit is missing a pedal, so you tape a sneaker to the kick. The guitar cable shorts out halfway through sound check, but Zane's got another one, frayed at the ends but still working if you don't move too much. You're not making music so much as making do, and that's the difference between the dream and the daily grind. Every show is a roll of the dice, a test of how much you can wring out of what's left. You pass around homemade flyers before the set, hand-drawn with thick marker lines, your band's number scrolled in the corner for anyone who wants to book you. There's no website, no manager, just the hope that someone in this crowd will call and offer another gig. You watch the paper get damp in the hands of friends and strangers, ink bleeding into their palms. The flyers are a lifeline, but they're also a reminder that every opportunity is fleeting. The music starts, and the stage shakes. The bass is too loud, rattling the floorboards, and the mic smells of 1,000 mouths. You can feel the vibration in your ribs, a pulse stronger than anything you've eaten all day. For a moment, you're not thinking about next week's rent or whether your guitar will hold out. The music swallows everything else. You scream into the mic, and the crowd screams back, sweat and smoke mixing until the air tastes electric. Then the set ends. There's no encore, just the slow shuffle off stage, boots slapping on sticky wood. You pack up quick, careful not to lose anyone's borrowed gear. Outside, you and Zane split a cigarette under the awning. He cracks a joke about the amp catching fire next time. You laugh, but the truth is, it could happen. You're always one snapped string, one missed payment away from losing it all. Back in the basement, the camaraderie lingers. You crash on the floor, the concrete cold against your cheek, the sound of distant sirens fading into the background. There's a sense of family here, but it's a family built out of necessity, not choice. You lean on each other because nobody else will. You stare at the ceiling, counting the water stains. The city outside moves on, indifferent to the music that shakes its bones. For every band that makes it out, 10 more disappear, swallowed by silence, by the weight of the grind, by the things nobody wants to talk about. You wonder which you'll be. The answer feels as slippery as the rain-soaked flannel clinging to your skin. That's the reality nobody writes on the flyers. Every night could be the last. Every song could be the last thing anyone remembers you by. The music is your only proof that you were ever here at all, even if the city forgets. You close your eyes, the echo of the last chord still buzzing in your ears. Some nights, the music drowns out more than silence. Seattle, 1994, backstage in a basement club with your bandmates and a borrowed amp. You stare at the sticky concrete under your boots. The floor, a mosaic of spilled beer, cigarette burns, and ancient gum. The air is thick with mildew, and the sting of stale smoke clings to your flannel. A couple of regulars shuffle past, giving you a nod that means nothing and everything. Most nights you play for faces you'll never see again. But tonight, even the regulars look like ghosts. Your fingers fumble with the duct tape holding the amplifier together. You run a thumb along the jagged edge, feeling the rough texture dig into your skin. It holds for now, but you know every set risks the whole thing falling apart. You and your drummer laugh about it, calling it grunge engineering. Mark's eyes are red-rimmed, his smile cracked open just a little too wide. He taps his sticks on a splintered stool, the rhythm slow and anxious. The venue owner steps in, eyes darting between you and the battered amp. He says you're up in 5, and you nod, pretending to be older than you are. You're not even 20 yet, but you've played sets in places that would card you if you weren't carrying a guitar case bigger than your torso. No one asks for your ID as long as you keep the music loud and the crowd thirsty. You tune the guitar, twisting the pegs until the strings groan. The E string is frayed, and the pickups buzz with every touch. You can't afford new gear, so you borrow what you can from whoever is willing. Tonight, the bass is on loan from a guy named Terry, who only asks that you wipe it down before returning it. You thank him, but you know there's no way to scrub away the sweat and desperation ground into the fretboard. When the lights go down, a single bulb flickers at the edge of the stage. You step forward, the weight of your guitar slung low, the strap biting into your shoulder. Your breath catches, part nerves, part the chemical haze floating in from the alley. The first chord crackles out, not clean but raw, the sound fighting through static. Your voice joins in, but the mic is old, the cable patched with electrical tape, and half your words disappear into a hiss. The music drowns out more than silence. It blots out the hunger gnawing at your stomach, the eviction notice at home, the rumors drifting through the city about friends who didn't make it. Each note is a plea for someone to remember your name, to hear you through the static. You wonder if anyone listening knows how close you are to falling apart, how easy it would be to vanish into the smoke and neon. Between songs, you catch glimpses of the crowd, blurry outlines, some swaying, some staring through you. The myth of grunge is already growing, stories written by people who never spent nights fixing amps with duct tape or scraping together coins for a bus ride. The city outside is wet and cold, but down here, the only warmth comes from the amp's hum and the heat of bodies pressed close to the stage. You finish a song and look over at Mark. He grins, sweat running in rivulets down his face, but you see the exhaustion behind his eyes. The set list is scribbled on a napkin, already smudged and unreadable. You forget the next song, but the crowd doesn't notice. You lean into the next riff, hoping the momentum will carry you through. The bass vibrates against your ribs, the beat rattling through the cracked walls. For a moment, you feel invincible, like maybe this is the night everything changes. But the moment passes, The amp sputters. Your voice wavers, lost in the static. A bottle shatters near the bar, and someone laughs, a sound sharp as broken glass. The darkness creeps in around the edges of the stage, gathering in corners where old friends used to stand. You remember the last time you saw Jamie, her arm wrapped tight around herself, eyes glazed over. She stopped coming to shows. Some say she moved. Others whisper darker endings. The city's heroin haze feels closer every night. You play on, because that's what you do. You play with what you have, even if it's borrowed, broken, or barely holding together. Each song is a bargain with the shadows. One more night, one more chance to be seen. The applause, when it comes, is thin but real. You soak it in, letting it fill the spaces where hope used to live. A sudden silence falls between songs. The crowd is restless, and you hear someone mutter about the sound. You fiddle with the amp, twisting wires, praying for another few minutes of life. The owner watches from the back, arms crossed, already thinking about the next band. You're a warm-up act, a name no one remembers in the morning. The set ends with a whimper, not a bang. You unplug your guitar, the silence pressing in. The only sound left is the bass line echoing in your bones. You catch your reflection in a cracked mirror behind the bar, eyes hollow, hair slicked to your forehead, flannel heavy with sweat and rain. You look older than you feel, or maybe you just feel everything too much. Outside, the city glows under streetlights, rain falling in sheets. You and Mark huddle under a broken awning, waiting for a ride that may or may not come. The night air tastes like smoke and regret. You wonder how many more nights you can keep doing this, how many more times you can scrape yourself off the floor and step into the light. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails. The myth of grunge keeps growing, but the faces behind it are starting to blur. You grip your guitar case tighter, the wood slick beneath your fingers. All you have is the music, the grit of wet flannel, the sting of raw strings, and the hope that someone, somewhere, hears you above the static. The only thing that's changed since you stepped on stage is the weight in your chest. You're still here, but you feel the darkness pressing closer. The same scene that lifts you up can swallow you whole. Years later, your music echoes from scratched records and warped tapes, the stories behind them already fading. Seattle, 1998. You alone in a basement as the rain pounds above. You can feel the lingering damp in your chest. The flannel shirt you've worn for 3 days is heavy with sweat, rain, and the memory of 1,000 rehearsals. Down here, in the low glow of a single bulb, your boots stick to the concrete, and the air smells like mildew and old cigarettes. You hear distant laughter from the street, but your world is the muted thump of bass leaking through cracked walls. Each note you play cuts through the chill, but your fingers sting with every slide. The guitar strings always a little too raw, the sound always a little too jagged. You've spent half your life in rooms like this. Some nights, you're wedged between amps and the laundry machine, knees pressed against a snare drum. Other times, it's someone's unfinished basement, musty, cluttered, always cold. There's never enough insulation to keep the Seattle winter out. You rehearse until your breath fogs in the air. layering chords and harmonies that might never leave these walls. The only thing sharper than the cold is the hope you cling to, that brief flicker that maybe this song, this show, would finally matter. But hope is thin as the blanket you pull over yourself when you finally crash on a sagging couch, hours before sunrise. Grunge musicians often practiced in cold, damp basements. You remember the first time your band played The Crocodile, or at least a bar pretending to be the crocodile. The stage was barely more than a couple of planks hammered together in the corner, sticky with old beer. The lights so dim you could barely see your bandmate's face. The crowd pressed close, a blur of plaid and smoke nodding along, half lost in their own haze. Grunge bands sometimes played in venues where the stage was just a wooden platform in the corner. The speakers buzzed, and every time you sang into the battered microphone, your voice came out twisted, distorted, as if the world only wanted to hear you through broken glass. Grunge musicians sometimes used microphones and speakers that distorted their voices. You play hard, even when you're half asleep. The rhythm settles into your bones, and the music is the only thing that makes sense. Some nights, you close your eyes and feel the bass line rumble through your chest, pushing back the hunger gnawing at your belly. Other nights, the exhaustion is so deep it feels like you're underwater, the world muffled by fatigue and the echo of feedback. You look up to find the audience gone, the bar empty, except for the bartender sweeping up bottle caps. You're left with the ring of a final chord and the dull ache in your hands. After shows, you never know where you'll end up. Sometimes it's a stranger's kitchen at 3 a.m., the wallpaper peeling and the fridge humming like a broken amp. You crash on floors, couches, sometimes just your own jacket. The city is a patchwork of borrowed spaces, each one smelling of spilled beer and old pizza. Grunge musicians sometimes had to sleep in unfamiliar houses after shows. You wake up disoriented, the taste of stale cigarettes in your mouth, the ache of yesterday's music still pulsing in your blood. For a moment, you forget whose floor you're on. Then you remember the show, the faces in the dark, the way your song almost caught fire before the moment passed. You think about the records and tapes you made, the ones that now sit gathering dust in someone's attic or spinning, warped, on a thrift store turntable. The music lives, but only in echoes. The stories behind the songs are fading faster than the ink on the liner notes. People remember the myth, not the cold. They talk about Seattle like it was a stage. But you remember the dark corners, the hunger, the way the city swallowed you whole and never looked back. There's a quiet ache in realizing that the world moved on while you were still tuning your guitar. The grunge scene becomes a legend. The faces blur, the venues close, and the city builds over the places where you left your sweat and your hope. Even the flannel shirts, once a second skin, become a costume for someone else's nostalgia. You are left with the memory of the chill, the sting of the strings, and the knowledge that existence was validated for a moment, only to be erased by time and the next trend that rolled through town. Every so often, you catch a song, your song, drifting from a car window or a bar jukebox. For a second, you're back in that basement, your breath clouding in the air, believing in something bigger than yourself. The illusion never lasts. The city's heartbeat is too fast, the world too eager to forget. You wonder if anyone else remembers the stories behind the legend, or if the myth is all that's left. You let the last note hang in the air, vibrating against the silence. The music fades. The cold stays. Seattle moves on, but the basement's chill never quite leaves your bones. The truth is, the legacy is fleeting, and the myth never tells the whole story.